Okay.
Yeah, I bet it can, if it's steel and it's just twisted on. It's a matter of getting
Yeah,
finished
he
up
says
with proper
It
depth.
sounded like he was exaggerating when he said thousands of cases.
Alright, there it is.
Look, you see this?
We weld the beam on.
I like zombies. I like agriculture. We bring the two together.
Well, we took some water for sure that the auger was twisted in half.
How you guys doing? Too much sliding around?
Down south.
And it's probably what it is.
Two-wheel drive, taking them off.
It isn't stainless steel.
Exactly.
We got one of those wire things that we can really turn the stem down. Different steel.
Okay,
No, it definitely feels.
I'm a volunteer.
it is 11 o'clock.
I know.
Call it a special delayed meeting. As to Withers. We have Mr. Didier and myself. Brad is on his way, so go ahead and start. If you'd join me with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our agenda this morning reads a 9 o'clock public hearing, but that has been pulled from the agenda. Our second item is naming rights, but I want Brad here to talk about that, so we'll go on to our third item, which is written here as a Clean Water Act drawdown. Over Brandon. Michelle?
Good morning, Commissioners, and thank you for taking my request to review the Clean Water Act that has been recently proposed.
Michelle, excuse me.
Yes, sir.
There's no place in any of the information that I see to talk about clean water.
The Clean Water Act, you saw the response of Darrell Olson's letter to them. I can get additional information, but I felt that that was pretty substantial. He references an opening letter, and I've got the information here, additional, some of it. But the Clean Water Act, Section 401, they want to talk about lowering the temperature of the water to 65 or 68 degrees. The temperature of those rivers were not that before the dams were built. It's an impossible thing to meet. And so it's another end run of using another federal act, as they did with the Endangered Species Act and the biological opinion, which are instructions on how to operate those dams. And just for review, in 2015, the technical management team was directed by NOAA, and the technical management team is federated tribes from both Washington and Oregon. NOAA and the Corps of Engineers works with both of them. They were directed to transport smelt, baby fish, down the river when the water was so hot it was killing them and the flow was low. And for decades, as in 2001, we had the exact same conditions. They are transported by barge all the way down below Bonneville and they're released. And every time we do that, as the record will show over the years, which is science, they talk about science, we get a 4-to-1 return. So only 13% were transported later in May instead of March. And they only got a 65% return. And ever since then, we've seen numerous groups come and hail that the dams are the problem. The technical management team did not do what it was directed to do. It did not follow its biological opinion. And furthermore, when a request for evidentiary hearing on the adult fish returns was presented, it was denied. And that brings us here today. I have come before this body and asked letters be written to the Department of Interior, which you have done. Today, I am asking for letters to be sent to the Department of Ecology because they basically truncated any ability for public comment. I'll read what Julie Reddick from Richland found out. That instead of discussing temperatures from the webpage, it says that the purpose for the permits is to authorize discharges from cooling water equipment, floor drains, sumps, facility, maintenance water, and other miscellaneous discharges. Ecology's webpage did not have the permits available and said to ask the EPA. I contacted the EPA, she said, but was told that these are actually pre-draft permits, which are different than public comment draft permits we expect to release later. So it appears that EPA and Ecology are ignoring and trying to truncate public comment on this very act. And you saw the letter from the Fish Cast Center. So what I've supplied is the contact information from Maya Bellin, and I am asking my county court commissioners to write them and voice your public opinion about how this is not possible, and it is an abuse of the 401 section of Clearwater Act. I can get you the Clearwater Act if you need that. I'm not a practiced politician, I just do what I do.
Now, that's clear or clean water, which I'm confused at how you're
Clean Water Act. The Clean Water Act.
So they're talking Clean Water Act, but they're talking temperature. And I would have to argue, as I read through all these information that was given to me on this, I need to get out more than I have. A letter here from James L. Call, who wrote the Great Salmon Hoax that I read, and I have it documented here. That I have lots of footnotes in here from his book, and this is a great book about the Great Salmon Hoax, and it's all about money. But he wrote in here, the Ecology's attempt to exercise 401 certified powers under the Federal Clean Water Act poses a serious threat to the continued usefulness of Columbia and Snake Rivers dams. As the DC Circuit remarked last month, it is now commonplace for states to use 401 to hold federal licensing hostage. That's what they're doing.
That's correct.
And then as I read through the rest of the information, I just started to contemplate, they're talking about taking Lower Granite from 738 at first to 733, which is only a drop of 5 feet. But then down here, they're talking about taking it clear down to 1690, where the fish ladder won't even work. And they've got tubes that they're going to discharge the salmon through, and a whole bunch of more extra effort.
That's page 2, and they already have a weir that they finished in 2015, which I don't think the Fish Passage Center expected that to happen. I think that's what, in my opinion, as I observe going back over history, that prompted this delayed decision suddenly that, we're not going to do what we did for decades.
And then the thing that really caught my eye was overall survival of the juvenile salmonoids migrating across the Lower Granite Reservoir will likely improve. Likely is a word that,
Vague language.
yes,
Not-
very vague. And then they talk about the erosion of the roads and the railroads,
In 1992.
drop that down. So then we're talking about all of the grain then will have to be transported by trucks or rail car.
So page 7 of the information you got, I want to touch on that because you always have a growth management plan, and I think you have a new draft of that since I requested one from the administrator a year or so ago. But that would mean 174,000, this is numbers from 2014, that would mean 174,440 semi-trucks or 43,610 railroad cars. And that is going to have a dramatic impact. I don't know if you've taken that and calculated it into the cost of our roads in the county to adjust for that. But there are so many sectors that are affected here. Ratepayers, they can raise the rates, which they're going to. If we see what it's going to be 10% plus the cost of the study and the cost of the spill when we couldn't bring in revenue. It's all going to go to people who are supposed to be getting fair housing, and on the lower ends, it's just going to cost so much to heat or do anything with your home that that is a major impact on our citizens. So that is why I'm asking you to write a couple of letters. One of those letters is to Governor Inslee. And an opinion page in the Sunday paper about the Snake River Dam Task Force. Number one, I want you to know as an update that that initially was proposed to the Northwest Power and Conservation Council of the 4 states to do. There was no consultation of any other governors in those states by our governor, and they denied it. So now it's going to have to go to the arm of the governor, which is the Commerce Department, and Lisa Brown will be heading that. So but the funds have not been released in the appropriations bill because, as far as we can tell, the Democrats are not even agreed on that, the majority party or caucus and whatever. There's so many sensitivities to different words. I beg your pardon if I didn't do it correctly. But so we would like, there's no reason for them to do a study on a statewide basis when it's being federally done. So I would ask you to write Governor Inslee on that matter. I would ask you to write the Washington State Department of Ecology on their end run around attacking these dams again. We have multiple 2 to 3 studies that show the orcas are not as directly affected as people are led to believe, and very emotionalized, and I agree, tragic situations for our orcas. But I think that we should direct funds, if we're going to direct any, to the immediate building of salmon and help with the orcas rather than waste $750,000 on a study. The last thing that I'd like you to write a letter to is directly to the litigation case. And the letter I would ask for, request go directly to the Department of Interior, the Corps of Engineers, and Department of Energy. Because in an EIS, you have to have an EAS, and we cannot find one. All counties are supposed to have a copy of that initial study, the scope of what the study will be. And we were literally told from the representatives of Bonneville Power that they didn't have to do it. The judge is going to take them and slap them down. Now we all know that Trump said, hurry up and finish this thing. That is somewhat helpful, but it runs the potential of what's called the judge appointing himself the river master. It's a literal appointment. And I have talked to representatives at the Corps. I have talked to, they think that Congress is the only one that can build the dams or the only one that can take it down. And I would argue that this letter from Patty Murray that did not go to any Department of Natural Resources or any committee went directly to Chuck Schumer, Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell, and Nancy Pelosi, stating that the 2014 buyout was not satisfiable to the requirements, which we strongly disagree with. We think that undoing that has a potential for the most harm. These EAS requirements need to be brought out, and I would ask that you solicit more manpower from the cabinet level, because right now Congress is locked up on just about everything. And they do have the power to do the Endangered Species Act exemption. The other choices are waited out. Our BPA administrator is Elliot Mainzer. He has not been replaced by a new appointment yet. And the judge stands ready to take apart the 2014 biological opinion, which then caused another succession of the renegotiation of the fish accords. And they went from $700 million to about $1.2 billion. We have no accounting of where that money goes to. And we're back to battling different groups for the same resources that was satisfied in the 2014 buyout. So I asked for 3 letters from my county commissioners. Any other questions? I will supply some of the documents that I brought with me today.
Well, as far as that Clean Water Act, when you lower a pool of water as a farmer, watching it melt off 3 years ago, when a pool of water is lowered, it exposes sediment that's behind those dams. And as you increase the flow of the water, the sediment will break away and go down. You're not going to have clean water now. You're going to pollute the water with sediment.
And the salmon beds.
This doesn't make any sense. And as you lower a pool of water, the water will heat even more because the depth of the water. So Keith, these are things we need to put into the letter, that it doesn't make any common sense. There's no good sense here in this action, and I think we need to put these letters together and get it sent out.
One final point. You mentioned farming. Now, they can increase rates for all this, and quite frankly, carbon tax on all the semi-trucks and trains, which I don't know that we'll get the benefit from that. But farmers can't go anywhere else for water. And the transport of our wheat will be gone. And it'll increase the cost of our wheat, will no longer be competitive. And Eastern Washington State brings about as much revenue as the entire state of Idaho. And I think that we have a voice, and I think that we have impact and power, but I believe that citizen activism, presenting these cases to you with facts, is grounds for action.
So if they lower that to 690 feet behind the lower granite, how many farmers, is that going to eliminate all the pumping sites? Their suctions will be out of the water pool?
My understanding is there's about 300 farms that would be affected. I would have to double check on that, but there's about 300. On both sides of the river, though.
Would they
not
be
just in
allowed
Franklin.
to extend their suctions into the pool of water, or are they just going to be out of water?
Well, if the judge becomes river master, the commission that is unelected and unrepresented will probably be the Fish Passage Center, and you'll have to go ask them. So I can't answer that.
There's 300 farms in the lower granite pool.
On both sides of the river, there's the 300 farmers that depend on the river. I don't know if they're all taking irrigation, but they're all affected by the lowering of the granite, whether transport by wheat or not. And that is something I don't want to overstate or understate. I can get that for you if you need that.
The lower granite pool is only so long.
Yeah.
So
And one other impact. If you set this precedent where a federal judge carves away the power over the river from the federal agencies and from Congress in these 4 states, you have to think about the other waters, bodies of water, and what they transport. And I have done some study on that, and these waterways across this country, not just Washington State, transport bulk food, and I know people don't like coal, but other items that our economy drives. But more importantly, it transports our munitions and our troops to war, if we are called upon that. And in this time and in our nation, we need to make sure that we are defending our borders, and we're not allowing a precedent to be set here in Washington State and then taken across the Mississippi, the Missouri, and the St. Lawrence, or wherever those other rivers are. But the waterways are a major driver of the economy in our country, and they're a major driver of power and energy, clean energy, and they're a major source of protection for our country.